So Toussaint Louverture is going to be the main leader, not just of the whole Revolutionary Army, but once they are able to take control of most of the island, he's really the leader of the whole country. And the first move is that he doesn't want to have a situation where everyone is just getting killed and it's incredibly violent. So he moves from more of like a reactionary, revenge-driven revolution to making it more of traditional warfare. So they take more prisoners. So if you have like a white landowner class person, they are then put into prisons. And oftentimes the land that was theirs wasn't always destroyed, but then later was just kind of taken over and then utilized the way it was. So people would live in the house. And so rather than burn the house down, have people live in that house. So essentially, they're in this situation where the Revolutionary Army is controlling the former colony. However, the gens de couleur, that free people of color class, is going to try to take power of the whole government and kind of lead the colony. And this is going to create tension between the former slave class and now what was the middle class, the free people of color. So there is definitely tension between those two classes, which is going to boil over in a few years. The French National Convention is going to abolish slavery in Haiti and across their whole empire. So this was that first revolutionary government in France. So they abolished slavery and hoped that would maybe make it so that Haiti could still be part of France if slavery was abolished. However, with their government in the shambles that it's in, it doesn't really have any control over a place that's really far away. And since they're about to have a new leader named Napoleon, it's not going to stick there. So Haiti's going to be really, from this point forward, kind of like in its own hands. You know what I mean? It's kind of led by the people living there. All right. In 1799, some of those tensions between the former middle class, the free people of color, and the former slave class is going to boil over, and conflict is going to arise, where essentially the free people of color want things to return back to the old system, where there was slavery, and essentially are going to try to make it so that they're plantation owners and that former slaves have to return back to slavery.
Wait, why do they want that?
Because people are greedy and they want to be rich and wealthy. I mean, well, the problem is that when they were, although they're all from African descent, they did have more rights in France, the free people of color. So they still had this feeling of superiority that they wanted to continue to have. So people still, just as humans, naturally do want to have wealth, and that was kind of what they were pushing for. So it is kind of one of those things where it is initially they're like, are you kidding me? But even back in France, many free people of color did have own land and did own slaves as well. However, once again, this is not a smart move. Let's think about this. One, not only is it completely inhumane, but let's remember that that the free people of color is about 4 or 5% of the country's population, and the rest of the population that's there and has power is a military that just fought and died for freedom. So having another group come in and say, oh, we're going to return to slavery, you're not going to make it very long. So a vast majority of that middle class, or people who are openly part of that middle class, are going to end up getting killed by the Revolutionary Army. Yes?
Wait, so if France and the United States are allies, and it says America helped Toussaint in order to get rid of France, like did the relationship dwindle or something?
So that's a good question. So we got to think about a couple things here. One, France it's 1799, so France is now ruled by Napoleon. He just got into his new role. Napoleon is also someone who's trying to take over the rest of Europe. So right now, the United States is actually worried maybe Napoleon would try to have a land invasion in America. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they supported Toussaint and supplied weapons and other military supplies, food to the army in order to weaken France. And then this last bullet point is just talking about how Toussaint gets the name Louverture. It just stands for break through enemy lines. It's just talking about he gets that name basically because it's a war reference that he was such a good general that his armies would always break through the enemy's lines. Can I move forward?
No.
1 second.
Okay. So now Toussaint is kind of in a situation where he is the clear-cut leader of the whole island, or at least what was formerly the French-controlled part of the island. He does go over into the Spanish side, which is now the Dominican Republic, and does, even though there was not nearly as much slavery on that side of the island, does free many of the slaves on the Spanish side as well with his army. All right. So 1 year later, Toussaint needs to take some pretty extreme actions. First of all, he is leading a country that just had a revolution, so the country is not very organized, and because of that, they also do not have very much money, and they also don't have a lot of organized leadership. So he's going to write a constitution that gets signed that essentially makes him a dictator. Now, a lot of people kind of question this when you think about, like, well, you just had a revolution, don't you want to form a democracy? Well, if you think about what just happened in France, where they were formerly part of that country, that they just tried to do the whole republic, democracy, people have power. And you look what happened there is essentially there was months and months of public executions in Paris, and tons of people were killed during the Reign of Terror. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, it didn't look like really the best government ever. The United States had tried to have their republic with the Articles of Confederation. That failed. So now they're trying to start their new government. And really no one knows if it's going to be successful at this point. So you're looking at, like, we have a leader, someone who led most of the people on the island to freedom. So maybe him being a dictator or being the one true ruler isn't necessarily a bad idea. However, he does do something that is going to take away quite a bit of his popularity. He reimposes the plantation system. So he's saying we've got this struggling economy. We know ways this island has made money in the past. We should go back to growing sugar. However, essentially it looks a lot like a system of slavery because many of the people working on the plantations are essentially forced to be there. Yes? No.
Looks like Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, he does look like Samuel L. Jackson in that painting. But so anyways, it is like it's a surprising move. I mean, he's trying to save the economy of the island. However, the problem is that although the people working on the plantations were not slaves, it was basically like you were in the military or you were working on a plantation. And although you could switch plantations and move around, it wasn't very different. So it was often very much compared to as things not changing very much.
So it was like a